Good afternoon, my name is Vala Tavanova, and I want to thank everybody who joins us today in Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform. It's day 478 of the full-scale invasion of our homeland by Russian aggressor, and now we will be talking about the work of our state emergency service, which within the last week had a lot of work to do. Unfortunately, I want to introduce our today's speaker. It's Oleksandr Khorunzhiy, press officer of the State Emergency Service of Ukraine. Mr. Oleksandr, good afternoon. Good afternoon, glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. Mr. Oleksandr, I cannot help but starting a conversation with today's shelling by the occupiers. The city of Kyiv ended up under another attack. What do you know about the consequences of this most recent strike? For the time being, we are double checking the information, but I have to state that we are already working in Kyiv region, specifically in Vyshgorod district, as a result of the falling of the debris. There 3 residential buildings were destroyed, plus 15 more damaged. Besides, there are 2 industrial facilities damaged too. A fire erupted in one of the residential buildings, and we had to engage 2 vehicles and 11 units of personnel to put out the fire. Also, the debris was fallen on the area of 2 hectares, which resulted in fire, and we engaged 1 firefighting unit to put out fire in that area. Thank you for this information. May and June have become quite dangerous months. The enemy commits terroristic acts almost on a daily basis against our civil infrastructure and civil population. Unfortunately, can you give us more information about these recent events? We remember a recent missile strike on Odessa and other settlements that end up under missile attacks almost daily. What was the work of State Emergency Service there? How many servicemen were engaged in mitigation of consequences, and what are actually the consequences that you observe? Around 3 o'clock in the night of the 6th of June, the armed forces of Russian Federation detonated the dam of Kakhovskaya HPP. The upper part of the dam was destroyed. Is the sixth step of Dnipro cascade. A lot of area ended up under the threat of flooding, and local governments got engaged in mitigation of the consequences in coordination with State Emergency Service. First of all, we resorted to evacuation of civilians, and that was the first thing that we had to do. The second, we had to deliver the food rations, potable water for those evacuated. Third, it was not only evacuation of people but also of the animals. You've seen a lot of those videos. A lot of animals, I mean home cattle and the pets, were evacuated. We deployed additional personnel and vehicles in the areas of emergency. We deployed all-terrain vehicles, boats, heavy engineer material, plus personnel from other regions. We created joint teams from 11 regions, if I'm not mistaken, right away to react promptly to this emergency. Well, right away I have to ask you about the regions that were affected by this catastrophe, this man-made catastrophe. First of all, it's Kherson region, Mykolaiv region, Dnipropetrovsk region. Those were the 3 key regions where our personnel and vehicles worked to mitigate this emergency. As of now, we have in the territories of Kherson, Mykolaiv and Dnipropetrovsk regions, which were mostly affected by the catastrophe. There are 54 set populated areas still flooded, plus 17 more on temporarily occupied territory of Kherson region. more than 1,900 buildings were flooded. It's 1,422 buildings in the city of Kherson alone, 216 households, and the forces of State Emergency Service evacuated 268 animals and 1,244 people. In the evacuation stations that were deployed, we have psychologists working who provide psychological first aid to 413 persons. Now each region separately. In Kherson region, there are still 34 populated areas flooded, including 17 in the West Bank and 17 more in temporarily occupied territories. In Kherson, in the city of Kherson, 1,422 buildings are still flooded. Around 2,800 people were evacuated from Kherson region, and within the last day we evacuated 4 more animals on top of those 268 that we evacuated before. 398 persons were provided psychological first aid by the psychologists of the State Emergency Service of Ukraine within the last day. Now that the water level is going down, I have to say that there is a gradual decrease of water level being observed by the surveillance stations deployed by State Emergency Service. So from the beginning of this day, the water level has fallen 10 centimeters and the trend is falling. We actively use the motorized pumps to pump the water from cellars and in the land plots and in the lower areas. We pump the water from 245 buildings, and we were able to pump about 16,000 cubic meters of water, and within the last day we pumped about 22,000 cubic meters from more than 40 buildings in Kherson region. About 16 tons of food rations and hygienic products are delivered to the people. In total, more than 5 tons within the last day. We use water purification stations using which we were able to purify 17,000 liters of water, which is delivered to the affected people. So we purified more than 22,000 liters of water, plus more than 70,000 liters were purified for technical purposes. We cleared the territory from the residues of petroleum products. 240 square meters of equator were cleared from the... Oh, now that sound is on. I will ask our technical team to switch it off. Thank you. We keep receiving the reports from the civilians, the applications with the request for help. They come through our hotline 101 telephone number, and we reacted to more than 1,500 such requests. Within the last day only, we provided first aid to the people upon more than 160 such requests. 47 units of material work in Kherson region for the time being, and I would like to stop also at Mykolaiv region, because this region was also affected significantly by this terroristic act committed by Russian Federation. 20 settlements are still flooded, more than 100 buildings and more than 200 land plots. In Mykolaiv region, from the flooded areas, State Emergency Service evacuated more than 1,000 people, including 167 children. The first psychological aid was provided to 15 people. We delivered 18 tons of potable water and 30 8 tons of food rations, specifically to Afanasivka and Vasilivka villages. State Emergency Service also supported the transportation of and delivery of food rations to the residential areas. In Mykolaiv, we have 10 vehicles and more than 40 units of personnel working along the riverbeds of Ingulets and Dnipro River. Since the beginning of the work in Mykolaiv region, in total more than 100 units of personnel and more than 50 units of material were engaged in mitigation of consequences of catastrophe. We observed the decrease of water level in Kakhovka water reservoir from 16.77 meters to 9 meters. In fact, more than 7 meters and 70 centimeters down within the last couple of days. It created a number of concerns and negative consequences. And unfortunately now the water pumping stations operation is suspended in a number of facilities, and more than 35 settlements ended up without centralized water supply. More than 1,000 consumers. The State Emergency Service organized the supply of water to those populated areas. More than 7,000 tons of water in total were delivered. That's the total. And the State Emergency Service alone delivered more than 4,000 tons. 31 units of material are engaged in delivery of water to those populated areas, plus 60 units of personnel, about 60 units. Yet another problem that we were facing when the stream was intensified, the mine defense installed by the enemy was washed away by the stream, and now our units inspect. We created the pyrotechnical teams which inspect the areas where the water level is subsiding. Such teams inspected more than 44 kilometers of roads and the areas of more than 146 hectares, including 100 hectares in the micro-district Ostriv, which was mostly affected by the flooding. 4 kilometers of the shoreline were also inspected by the pyrotechnics of the State Emergency Service in coordination with the National Police, National Guard of Ukraine and other operators of mine activity working in those areas to secure the people from the explosive devices. Our advice is such: if you see any explosive device, don't touch it, don't come close, just call the hotline 101. This is the gold advice that we always use in communication with the citizens. That's probably it in brief regarding our work in Kherson region. I also want to add that as of 8 o'clock, or even as of now, as of 16th of June, our call center received and processed around 2,000 applications of the citizens and requests for help. Mr. Alexander, the question is about the vehicles and the pumps. Are they available in sufficient numbers? Yes, our material is sufficient, but we never reject any help. Right now, the key type of material which is used is those for clearing the ways, the alleyways of approach, for pumping water. There's the engineer vehicles and the motorized pumps for pumping water from lower areas and cellars, and just regular, say, cranes which are used for clearing of the pathways. We know that our incredible Ukrainians responded to this tragedy, and all the volunteers and just regular Ukrainians focused their efforts on helping state emergency service and mitigation of the consequences of this tragedy. Is there still a need in such help? If it's so, then in what areas specifically? Well, obviously help is always favored. I mean, the motorized pumps and engineer material for the works, and we cooperate with a number of organizations. We engage the mechanism of civil protection of European Union, which Ukraine joined just on the 20th of April this year, and they started providing the necessary material immediately. Poland, for example, supplied 9 very powerful motorized pumps for those works, and we appreciate the input of Poland, and specifically the head of the firefighter service of Poland. They always respond to our requests, our problems, and they continue helping us and supporting us with the material. Specifically, we received also support from Azerbaijan by fuel. We got help from Czech Republic, from Moldova, and the process is still underway. We're in constant contact with all the European and not only European countries to engage the maximum number of means and measures to mitigate the consequences of this tragedy. There are a lot of volunteers helping us. We coordinate their work. We coordinate in their work, and we appreciate the input of everybody who responded. Obviously, we are in contact with the national police and all the security and defense forces, and we coordinate the work on spot. We favor everybody who gets involved in mitigation of consequences of this tragedy, and we will continue working together and taking maximum effort to help the people in the shortest terms possible. Dear colleagues, if you have any questions on the floor, please proceed. Good afternoon, Ukrinform. What is the number of vehicles engaged in mitigation of the consequences of the tragedy in Kakhovskaya HPP that were handed over to State Emergency Service by our foreign partners? Well, the vehicles keep coming, and I've listed already those vehicles that were handed over to us within the mechanism of civil protection. The special vehicles, motorized pumps, Poland handed over the motorized pumps, as I mentioned, and they are all used for mitigation of consequences of the tragedy in Kherson and Mykolaiv regions. I cannot give you the exact number that was already provided to us, but the material keeps coming, and we channel it straight away for mitigation of the consequences. Thank you very much. Thank you for this broadcast. I'm reminding you, joining us was Oleksandr Khorunzhiy, the press officer of the State Emergency Service of Ukraine, and our next briefing will be at 1400. We will be talking about the financial system of Ukraine during war, so stay tuned, work together for our victory. We want to thank our State Emergency Service and Armed Forces of Ukraine and everyone who helps in mitigation of consequences of this tragedy. And glory to Ukraine. Thank you. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes.